Sam Dennison, who's one of the leaders of the Faithful Fools, the ministry we are so beautifully connected to in this congregation in the Tenderloin, bid at a past auction on the right to choose the Minister's Book Club book and chose what we're reading and discussing together this month. We're reading and discussing Danielle Sered's book, Until We Reckon, which you still have time to work your way through before the 17th when we gather. A powerful book about violence and the ways in which it is a force in our country and in our lives, and mass incarceration, and the road to repair for the damage of all of it. In her introduction, Sered ends with something that felt very relevant to today. She wrote, "It is commonly understood that one of the effects of grief is that it can foreclose our ability to imagine. It is as though each of us can look only as far into the future as we can into the past. Healing, therefore, as a process of dealing with what has happened, is at its heart a labor of forming a life-affirming relationship with what is to come. We look back so we can look ahead. We grieve so we can imagine. We grieve so that we can imagine. If that's true in the world that she's writing about, a world that is in the struggles of deep violence, it's true actually of all of our losses and all grief. The time that we spend mourning and looking back is what allows us to imagine a future beyond it. To mourn isn't just the way to work ourselves forward slowly from the grip of grief, but it's also what keeps us on this journey, asking about the legacy of love and wisdom that we were given from the one we lost, those things we carry with us. And inevitably, that journey is always about what it is we feel we are left to carry forward. In other words, to imagine a future and how we will step into it differently, in part because of who we are after what we lost. So mourning gives way to life and life-giving, inspired living. Such is the magic and the alchemy of rituals of grieving. We gather this morning for all of this, to honor the people that we have loved and lost, those whose lives, too, were lost as part of our larger world, but touched us in the ways that sometimes someone we don't even know personally feels like they have affected the trajectory or quality of our own life. We want this invitation to be open, too, to all of the lives or the living creatures that we've lost, since we know, too, that for so many of us, the loss of our four-legged creatures or winged creatures is also something that needs a place to be named. And we invite you into the partnership of the Spirit of this hour, as you already are. So I give you a moment to gather your thoughts, if you haven't already come prepared. You'll notice in the order of worship we offer a format to help frame your sharing if it's useful. We'll invite you to come up, but we also have a mic for those who would rather that a microphone be brought to them. Periodically, we'll ask for you to just raise your hand, and I will bring you the mic. If you've brought something you want to offer on the altar, as some folks have already laid there, you can, but also you can just come forward, speak the name, and whatever it is you want to share. There are candles ready to be lit. We'll weave in the participation of those, Jonah will help us with that, who are participating on live stream. So you can write in your sharing on the chat, and we'll pull you into this space and light a candle for what you name, who you name. We're going to make one small ask that those who brought food as part of their offering wait until the second part of the sharing. That'll happen after we sing, after the offering, because or after the hymn we'll sing, because we have something special to say before we have that time. So we'll take a few minutes to prepare ourselves. In inviting folks forward, I think some of you have already placed photos and other items on the table in the front. So I would invite you, if you would like to and feel moved, to come forward first and say the name of the person who you are calling into our space today and a sentence about them. And then we'd ask everyone at the end to repeat the names so that we collectively as a community can say presente, to call them present into this space. And Mari is there to assist folks who, throughout the service. So if you have something on the altar today, please come forward and share with us who this person is so that we might join you in calling them into this space.
Kathleen, who do you have today?
So I have Jay DeFeo, and she is an artist, a teacher, and a dear friend of mine. She passed at 60 years old. Because she was a painter, she smoked and imbibed her paint and the tars at the same time. Anyway, I want to thank her for her generosity and her love.
Say her name again.
Jay DeFeo.
Presente.
Thank you. Yes. Who would you like to mention today?
Dudley Wessler.
Who was she to you?
He was my late husband, and we met when we were both seniors, and we had a wonderful life together of about 27 years before he passed away in 2017. We traveled the world, and it was, a very special time of my life. So what he did for me at the end is he put together this Travels with Dudley. And shortly before he passed on, he gave it to me. And it was such a special thing.
Would you like to put it on the altar today?
Yeah, I've got his picture there. Yeah.
Oh, and which one is his picture?
His picture of when we were married.
I'll hang it so people can see it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Say his name again.
Dudley Wessler.
Presente. He's here. Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Stephen Gerard, the husband, or now widow, of my wife, Trudy Lionel, who passed earlier this year in April. She was my partner, my confidant, my better half, and my advisor throughout all of that time. I give thanks for the wonderful contribution that she made to my well-being and everything we shared together for such a long time. I also give thanks for the wonderful relationship that Trudy had with this church over close to 40 years, which I shared from time to time as well. Again, I say her name, Trudy Lionel.
Presente. Thank you. And you brought a picture, right? There it is, so beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Tim Pori, and I call out the name of Shirley Elizabeth Gibson. She was my life's partner, and I want to give thanks for everything she taught me about love and life. And I lost her November 4th last year, and this is her photograph with our daughter, our firstborn child, and Shirley was never happier than when she was pregnant. She loved being pregnant. She loved being a mother. She loved placing other people first, and that's what she taught me about love. She died very well. She was a brave woman, but she taught me that the more you put other people first before yourself, the happier you will be. Shirley Gibson.
Presente.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I call out the name of my dear sister, Jean Noah Uhas. I give thanks for her loving heart and her zany sense of humor, which made everyone who knew her just love her so much. She brought so much joy. Again, Jean Uhas.
Presente.
Hi, I'm calling out the name of Peter Gable. He was a neighbor and a mentor and an activist. I give thanks for Peter's activism over the decades that helped create the beloved space that's now called the Noe Valley Town Square. It's a very meaningful place to me in my life, as is this building and community.
Say his name again.
Peter Gable.
Presente.
Thank you. My name is Anne Rovere Levitin, and I am calling out the name of my husband, Richard Levitin, for the love and generosity that he gave to me and to everybody. And I'm going to read a letter that he wrote to his doctor. He died on June 29th, 2016. Dear doctor, as you may know by now, I have a serious situation with cancer. I just wanted you to know that the love and support I am experiencing is remarkable. Neighbors bringing pureed food, children leaving chalk messages on the sidewalk, friends and loved ones offering so much in the way of support. Rides, shopping, not a problem. I am experiencing all of the compassion and love that humanity has to offer. Such a gift. People responding out of love, not pity. I actually cry from the beauty, not the pain. And this is the remarkable part of this. That's remarkable too. I have been close to death 3 times in my life. I have sat with death, and we each rose and went our separate ways. This time, we will leave together. I feel like I am walking to meet an old friend. I hope you do not fall into the trap and quagmire of I wish I caught it earlier. What self-defeating rubbish. You are a good doctor. No reply necessary, just wanted to write you. Richard Levitin.
Presente. Yes. Oh, Anne? Anne? Yes,
That I can't see.
Sure.
Okay.
What is the name of the person you're sharing today?
Well, there are 2 women.
Okay.
And I so want to give a thanks and be grateful for the women in my life, but 2 special ones. My mother was born as Caroline Duncan. She had a child at 13. She was 30 when I was born. I spent most of my life as being told I was the elder child. My older brother, who I never met, he would be 96, 98 right now, should he be alive. He was taken from her by my family in New York City and rushed away from her and adopted away, never to be seen again. My mother never recovered. The other person is my former wife, Natalie Meyer Dupree, who was with me at my mother's death on Christmas morning, 1987, when she was 76.
Say their names again.
Caroline Duncan Dupree.
Presente.
Natalie Meyer Dupree Bass. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Are you ready to?
Hi, my name is Lynn Quaid, and I call out the name of Marcia Aguilar, who was my across-the-street neighbor and dear friend for 40 years. I give thanks for our in-the-middle-of-the-street conversations, very deep conversations, and the joy of raising our children together. Marcia Aguilar.
Presente.
I'm calling out my mother, Susanna Maximina Bernajola, and I give thanks for her strength, her very dry sense of humor, and the love and friendship that she gave me.
Say her name again.
Susanna Maximina Bernajola.
Presente.
Hello, my name is Lisa, and I would like to call out the name of my mother, Elizabeth Marlowe, who passed away last year from COVID. I miss her very much. Elizabeth Marlowe.
Presente. Judith.
I call the name of Janine Bray, who was my friend. I give thanks for her courage and her questing spirit.
Say her name again.
Janine Bray.
Presente.
From the live stream,
Yes, yes.
Jonathan Silk has written the name of Robert Lane. Robert Lane. Presente.
Presente.
I call out the name of Jennifer Cohout, who was my big sister. I give thanks for her open heart because my sister always put openness and love before everything else. So even with and especially with family members who did not agree with her values politically or personally, she put love first, and I always respected that, and that's a fundamental for me because of her. Jennifer Cohout.
Presente.
I call out the name of Liz Cormier, a member of this congregation for many years, a woman who contributed so much time and energy and effort to the advancement of the principles of the United Nations, and we co-chaired a committee on which it was a privilege to serve with a woman with such dedication. And it was Liz who arranged to have the assisted hearing devices brought into the church. So for Liz, who had trouble hearing, Liz, it's us.
Presente.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Right there. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. I'll be brief. I have a few folks. My mother, Dorothy Johnson, who died this year, and her dear friend, Helen Alera. My mom for giving me the gift of life, and Helen for bringing us enormous joy in our families. Thank you. And our dear friends, John Yakos, Aunt Shirley, Aunt Marty, and Erwin, for great joy in our lives and supporting our family and community. And a dear friend of mine, a colleague, the therapist, Dan Weil, who brought collaborative couples therapy to the world and trained thousands of therapists. And died during COVID. And so I present, and also a dear friend, Gerard, who's on our photo there, our neighbor.
Can you say their names again?
I sure can. Dorothy Johnson and Erwin, Shirley, Aunt Marty, Dan Weil, Gerard, John Yakos, and Erwin.
Presente.
Hello, I call out the name of Colia Liddell Lafayette Clark. Colia was a civil rights icon. She died Friday night at 82 after a long illness. Colia was, along with her then husband, Reverend Bernard Lafayette, was one of the first people who in SNCC who organized in Selma. To me, she was a longtime mentor and a personal friend. I will miss her deeply. And I give thanks for the long life of activism she had and the role model she was for those of us who seek to be responsible dissidents, even in the movements we love. Thank you. Colia Clark.
Presente.
I call out the name of May and Earl Davis, who are my grandparents, teachers, therapists, and rescue squad for 50 years. I give thanks to them because they saved my life by their listening, caring, and unconditional love. May and Earl Davis.
Presente.
Hi. I call out the names of my parents, Betty and Carl Strand, who gave me a spirit of adventure when I was 10 months old, my brother and me, and they sold their house in Tacoma, bought a car, and drove down to Tijuana, Mexico, and back via Grand Canyon. And then the next year, when I was 2 years old, we lived in Alaska. And so it was the entire West Coast. But anyway, that's Carl and Betty Strand.
Presente. You want to put their pictures up, Liz? Do you want to put their pictures on the... Yeah, of course. Absolutely.
I call out the name of Hamilton Mitchell, my dear youngest brother who died last year. I will always be thankful for the joy that he brought to my life. Hamilton Mitchell.
Presente.
Oh, yes. We're just going to have the last two folks right now, and then we'll sing a hymn, and we'll open some time up for sharing again.
I'd like to call out the name of Alicia Occhiolini, Gorina Di Giuseppe, and Sarina Fortunato, who were my grandmother and my two great aunts. And I would like to thank them for their unconditional love. Alicia Occhiolini, Gorina Di Giuseppe, and Sarina Fortunato.
Presente.
Hi. I'd like to call out the name of my mother, Anita Evelyn Tancredi Adams. She was a symphony of Vermont. She was maple, syrupy, sugary love, and I miss her. I lost her 2 years ago at Christmas, and this is a picture of her, very tiny. I'll put it on the altar.
Say her name.
Anita Adams.
Presente.
We have space for more sharing, and as Mari said, we'll make sure this time to see if anyone wants us to bring the mic to you. We also wanted to have the folks who might have brought food or who brought food and want to say something about it use this time to do that. We asked folks if they felt moved to do that because it's a tradition around Día De Los Muertos, but also it's a tradition in the early American Puritan life that honoring the dead was often done at the graveyard. Graveyards were supposed to be built like parks, beautiful parks that made space and invitation for just that, and people would bring picnics and favorite foods of their beloveds. and share them. And there was laughter. And I was reminded in thinking about all of this about how it's just been the season of Diwali, and in a lot of Hindu temples, particularly when pujas are being done, people also bring food and lay it at the altar. Actually, the Catholic Church that was in Mumbai, people would do the same because traditions tend to influence each other in any community. And that food comes as a gift to the gods, and then as part of the service is blessed. And some of it is left for the gods, and some of it is kept to feed the priests. But the vast majority is given back to those who bring it, and at that point it's called prasad, it's blessed food. And when you're given the food at the end of the puja, you take it home to your family and you share it, or your neighbors, and you share it at the dining room table or however you see fit, so that everybody has this blessed food that feeds them. And so we'll invite that spirit into this offering of food. So if you brought something, you can say why, and then at the end we'll bless all the foods, and if people will allow, we'll bring them out to be part of our coffee hour or social hour later today. And so, once again, we extend the invitation for folks to come forward. I know, Mari, you have something on the altar, so why don't you begin?
I brought a pan de muertos, and they are for my cousin Marta Jo Martinez and my father, Ignacio Magaloni Salazar. Marta for being the sweetness in my life, and my father because he loved sweets. So Marta Jo Martinez and Ignacio Magaloni Salazar. Presente.
I have a name from the live stream. Hillary Whitaker Clark writes, I call out the name of my father, James Kenner Whitaker. He taught me to speak up and to advocate for others. James Kenner Whitaker. Presente.
I'm going to speak for Mary Castilla, so for a moment I will be her voice. I call out the name of Diana Castilla, who was my daughter. I give thanks for the 38 years of joy she brought to my life. And again, her name is Diana.
Presente. So you brought some food. What is it? And tell us about it.
It's banana bran nut bread, and it was one of my husband's favorites. So here we are.
Thank you.
I call out the name of Elisa Gonzalez Murray. She was my mama. And I give thanks for the fierce love she had for me and all her family, and her sense of humor, and her unending confidence in me. Elisa Gonzalez Murray. Presente.
Hi, I'm Danielle, and I call out the name of Joan Cronenberg Bear. She was my aunt, and she passed on Tuesday, and I used to spend summers with her, and I'm so thankful for that time of quiet thought and comfort. She was there for me when my mother passed away, Edna Lopez Cronenberg, who I give thanks for bringing me into this world, and I know I carry parts of her. And finally, I call out the name of Dr. Usha Guya, who is the mother of my friend who passed recently. I was there in her final moments, and I just want to remember her.
Can you say their three names again?
Joan Cronenberg Bear, Edna Lopez Cronenberg, and Dr. Usha Guya.
Presente.
Hello, I'm William Klingelhofer, and I call out the name of
former minister here, John Marsh, for his gentle soul, for his eloquent sermons, and for his high, squeaky voice.
Say his name again.
John Marsh, Reverend John Marsh.
Presente. Oh, you have food.
I brought some cheese and crackers for my sister Jean, who loved to have this with her Pinot Grigio.
Thank you. Is there somebody that would like me to come? Yes.
I call out the name of Marcel Joseph Peter Michael Quenneville. He was my father, and I give thanks for his sense of the hilarious and his unconditional love. Marcel Joseph Peter Michael Quenneville.
Is there anyone else? Would anybody else like me to come by?
We have one on the live stream, Mark Baker. Mark Baker writes, I call out the name of my late husband, Michael O'Laughlin, for his kindness and love that he gave so freely to others. Michael O'Laughlin, presente.
We also have a few other members who've passed away this year who we want to call into our community. Charles Frias, beloved member, Charles Frias. Margaret Ziegart, beloved member, Margaret Ziegart. And Sonia Defoe, beloved member, Sonia Defoe. Mari and I were also talking about the sense that we are not just holding, all of us, our private griefs right now. I mean, we never are, but it feels particularly present that we're not holding our private griefs alone. And that part of what we're all holding is the heaviness of so many things that are grief-worthy. And so even though that isn't the focus of this moment, to make and carve some space to name that together, because I think we live in a river of grief right now. So a piece of it would be the people lost to COVID-19. And I cringe when I look up the numbers, but I think the numbers are important, and they don't capture all of the suffering and the losses that we grieve. A colleague of mine who has had long COVID since before, he was one of the earliest cases of COVID in early March of that year that we all first heard about it, and who has largely had to leave his ministry and much of his life behind, and I'm sure you all know versions of that story. But in terms of lives lost in the United States, as of this morning, we had lost 1,098,221 human beings who were parts of networks of relationships and families and communities. And worldwide, that number is 6,605,442 that we know of. Those numbers are, I think, too big to comprehend, and yet we live in the aftermath of all of that loss. So I'm going to use our blue candle this morning, since it was part of our journey through pandemic. That was to light a candle for all of those losses and for all of the people whose lives were cut short by COVID-19 and who've left a hole that only they could fill. We call them and their memories and all the legacies of love and wisdom that they left behind into this space, and we call them presente. What else do we need to, oh, Jonah, please.
Yeah. Robert Strahan writes in the chat, I call out the names of my parents, Barbara Jean and Jack Strahan, the best parents who showed me love for all people. Lost you so early in my life. Barbara Jean and Jack Strahan. Presente.
We've had all those losses, and also all the children lost to gun violence. Uvalde, I think about those children, and just so many. I think collectively we're all being affected by these things. Loss of confidence in each other because of the political landscape also has got us grieving. So I just like to name those children too, all the children who are affected by gun violence. Presente.
Presente. The losses of life to war in Ukraine, which we have had to watch unfold, an unjust war, I think we can agree, but also other places where life is lost, protesting, standing up against authoritarian rule and people who would repress the human spirit and freedom in its rightful place to stand for itself. And so in honor of all of those losses to war and political oppression that fill our news hours and haunt our hearts, and that we can feel powerless to stop. So the grief of that, we call all of that loss into this space and call it presente. We'd invite you all to participate in this moment. We may not be able to hear and repeat what you say, but let's take a moment and call out something that you might be holding that you think is part of a collective grief that we all feel and hold, that we can pull it into this space of healing. We call all that was spoken and that remains unspoken in our hearts, what that grieves us, into this space, and we call it presente.